Linda Sobek was born on July 9, 1968, in Los Angeles, California, United States. She was the second child of Robert Bob Sobek and Elaine Sobek. Her older brother, Steve, soon became one of his sister's closest friends. Robert and Elaine were responsible and devoted parents who worked hard to instill strong moral values in their children. As a little girl, Linda was very shy and deeply attached to her family. As a child, she loved going hiking with her father and her brother, while she enjoyed cuddling with her mother and doing the kinds of things many young girls enjoyed. When Linda reached high school, she became more sociable and self-confident. Her mother noticed her attractive face and suggested that she use a little makeup to emphasize her beautiful features. After discussing it with Elaine, Linda signed with a modeling agency. Although she was hesitant at first, she soon became excited about what she was learning and grew confident and relaxed in front of the camera. Whatever she lacked in sophistication, she made up for with hard work and strong ambition. From that point on, Linda began taking part in fashion shows and doing small photo shoots with amateur photographers in order to expand her portfolio. At the same time, she was also a cheerleader at school. After graduating from high school in 1986, Linda realized that she wanted to devote herself fully to a modeling career. Despite being only about 5 feet 4 inches tall, which was considered a disadvantage for runway modeling, she gradually began receiving assignments, especially for catalogs, commercials, and magazines. At the age of 21, Linda auditioned to become a cheerleader for the Los Angeles Raiders. She competed against thousands of other applicants and earned a place on the Raiderettes squad. Her entire family celebrated her success, but it was especially exciting for Steve. Thanks to her charm, Linda was later named Raiderette of the Year, which increased her popularity in the entertainment world and gave her the opportunity to meet many celebrities from sports and film. A few years later, after leaving the cheerleading squad, job offers began pouring in, and it became normal for her to complete as many as 3 photo shoots in a single day. This allowed her to move out of her parents' home and into a house she shared with 3 other young women who were also building their careers. Although the modeling world was extremely demanding, Linda never allowed it to stop her from finding time for the people she loved, especially her mother. Her family was overjoyed to see her moving closer to her dream. Linda, however, had no intention of being satisfied with what she had already achieved. She understood that a modeling career could be temporary, so she began planning for her future. Her new goal was to become an actress, and she started auditioning for various television roles. In early October of 1995, Linda handed out her business card to several photographers at an event in Las Vegas. About a month later, she was invited to take part in a photo shoot for an automotive magazine. The photographers connected to the assignment was Charles Edgar Rathbun, an experienced professional automotive photographer who was often described as friendly, although he could sometimes become abrupt under pressure. On November 16th, Linda woke up in a good mood. She had an important commitment connected to the popular television series, Married, with children ahead of her. Early that morning, she unexpectedly received a call offering her an urgent photo shoot. Because she believed she still had enough time before her television commitment, she agreed to take the job. At exactly 10:45 in the morning, Linda called her mother to tell her that she had to hurry to a photo shoot and promised that she would call again later. However, she did not tell her where she was going or whom she was meeting. She took her cosmetics bag and appointment book, got into her car, and drove toward the agreed meeting place. That evening, Elaine became worried when she realized that she had heard nothing from Linda. That was very unusual for her. Linda normally called regularly and told her mother about her day, especially about the results of auditions and professional appointments. But that day there was only silence. Elaine shared her concern with her son Steve, who tried to reassure her by suggesting that his sister was probably simply busy. The following morning, Elaine contacted Linda's roommates, but none of them knew where she was. When Elaine learned that Linda had also failed to appear for her scheduled commitment connected to married with children, her heart sank. Once she realized that something was seriously wrong, she reported her daughter missing to the police. Investigators first questioned Linda's roommates. The women confirmed that the last time they had seen her, she had been leaving for a photo shoot. Linda's normal routine was well known. She frequently went to the gym and regularly visited her favorite stores and restaurants. Her roommates also explained that Linda carefully recorded her appointments in an appointment book. After thoroughly searching her room, however, police could not find it. Investigators then visited the gym Linda usually attended. The employees knew and liked her, but they said she had not been there the previous day. The same thing happened at other locations she frequently visited. At that point, a hotline was established to collect information about Linda's whereabouts. The central problem remained the same. Nobody knew where she had gone or whom she had planned to meet. 2 days had already passed since her disappearance. At roughly the same time, a road worker taking part in a cleanup operation in a remote area of the Angeles National Forest found several photographs inside or near a roadside trash container. The photographs showed an attractive young woman, and he decided to keep several of them. Meanwhile, police continued questioning Linda's former boyfriends, business associates, photographers, and other people in her social and professional circles. One after another, however, they were eliminated as suspects. Investigators found no evidence that any of them had been involved in serious conflicts with her. 4 days had passed since Linda disappeared, yet the police still had neither a clear motive nor a decisive lead. On the surface, investigators appeared to have no suspect and very little evidence, and frustration began to grow. Linda's family and friends, however, refused to sit back and wait. They printed tens of thousands of flyers containing her photograph, personal description, and information about her car. An initial reward of $20,000 was offered for information leading to her whereabouts, while further pledges eventually increased the reward fund to around $100,000. The Los Angeles Raiders organization, for which Linda had been a Raiderette, also helped draw attention to her disappearance, and news of the case spread quickly through the media. Several television programs devoted extensive coverage to the story. As a result of the massive publicity campaign, police began receiving approximately 100 calls every hour. Unfortunately, none of the early calls provided concrete information about Linda's location. The case appeared to be reaching a dead end till one important detail finally attracted attention. The man who had found the photographs several days earlier suddenly recognized that the woman in the pictures was the missing Linda Sobek. He immediately contacted police and told them precisely where he had discovered the photographs. The following day, investigators thoroughly searched the area and found additional evidence, including items connected to Linda and paperwork relating to a prototype Lexus sport utility vehicle that had been obtained for an automotive photo assignment. The paperwork was dated November 16th, the day Linda disappeared, and it was connected to photographer Charles Rathbun. The vehicle mentioned in the paperwork was a prototype Lexus sport utility vehicle that had not yet reached the consumer market. Police seized the document as important evidence. From that point forward, the search for Linda became heavily focused on the Angeles National Forest. Volunteers also joined the effort, searching large areas of rugged terrain. After several more hours of searching, one of Linda's friends discovered her cosmetics bag in another trash container approximately 10 kilometers, or about 6 miles, from the area where other belongings had been found. As investigators examined the evidence, they realized that the name connected with the prototype vehicle paperwork matched Charles Rathbun, a photographer Linda knew professionally. At last, investigators felt that they were beginning to see a possible path forward. Almost at the same time, police received information about an abandoned car in the parking lot of a restaurant in Torrance, California, matching the description of Linda's vehicle. Later that day, investigators examined the car and confirmed that it belonged to Linda. They also received additional information involving Charles Rathbun, one of the photographers with whom Linda had previously crossed paths professionally. Rathbun said that he had seen Linda on the day she disappeared and claimed that they had met that morning at a restaurant before the photo assignment. His early accounts about what happened afterward were inconsistent. Once investigators realized that he was the same photographer connected to the prototype vehicle paperwork, they began questioning him directly about the car and the photo shoot. Rathbun initially gave explanations that did not satisfy investigators and attempted to distance himself from Linda's disappearance. Nevertheless, he remained a key figure because evidence increasingly suggested that he was one of the last people to see Linda alive. Investigators wanted him to come in for further questioning. During the investigation, they confirmed that Charles Rathbun and Linda had encountered one another professionally before, and that they had seen each other at an automotive event in Las Vegas only weeks earlier. As pressure mounted, Rathbun became increasingly unstable. He made a disturbing telephone call to acquaintances while apparently intoxicated and said things suggesting that he bore some responsibility for Linda's disappearance. He also said that he had a gun and threatened to take his own life. One of the people involved in the incident was a female friend associated with law enforcement. She and others went to Rathbun's Hollywood residence in an effort to prevent a tragedy. It took some time to persuade him to come outside. When Rathbun finally appeared, he was visibly intoxicated and armed with a handgun. During the confrontation, a gun discharged and the bullet ricocheted from the pavement, grazing and injuring a woman who had been trying to help him. Fortunately, the injury was not serious, but the incident gave police sufficient reason to take Rathbun into custody. When investigators searched heaps, they discovered more than 100 firearms, which immediately increased their concern. They also found items including cord, tape, alcohol, and numerous unusual photographs in which models appeared to be posed as though they were dead. Under questioning, Rathbun dramatically changed his original story. He now admitted that he had taken Linda on a photo assignment involving the prototype Lexus vehicle. According to him, the photo shoot had taken place at the El Mirage Dry Lake area. Rathbun claimed that during the assignment, he had been showing Linda how to perform driving stunts with the vehicle, lost control while demonstrating a maneuver, and accidentally struck her. He said that when he got out and realized that Linda was dead, he panicked and later buried her body in the Angeles National Forest. Rathbun insisted that the incident had traumatized him so badly that he could no longer remember exactly where he had buried Linda. Police did not believe him because investigators still needed stronger evidence. Before they could build a complete murder case, they moved quickly to find weaknesses in his account. The vehicle Rathbun claimed had struck Linda was recovered and examined. It had apparently been cleaned very thoroughly, possibly more than once. However, forensic specialists found no damage to the exterior consistent with the kind of collision Rathbun described. There were no dents or scratches that would reasonably support his story of a fatal impact. Although investigators found no convincing exterior traces of fabric or hair from an impact, examination of the inside of the vehicle revealed suspicious reddish stains in areas between the seats, along with long blonde hairs. Investigators also noted damage inside the vehicle that could have been consistent with a struggle. As the investigation continued, further information emerged that placed Rathbun in an increasingly difficult position. Models who had previously worked with him told police that his behavior did not always remain within professional boundaries, and that he had sometimes behaved inappropriately. Those statements helped investigators identify what they believed might be a pattern of troubling behavior and strengthened their suspicion that Rathbun was involved in Linda's disappearance and death. Several models said that Rathbun could pressure women and make inappropriate comments or advances. Some described being reluctant to work with him unless they had little alternative. The situation became even more troubling when police learned that Rathbun had faced a rape accusation in Ohio in 1979. He was ultimately acquitted after the defense maintained that the encounter had been consensual. Meanwhile, forensic testing increasingly connected Linda to the prototype vehicle. Once investigators had assembled enough information, they used a psychological strategy. They told Rathbun that they were willing to consider his claim that Linda's death had been an accident. They suggested that finding her body could help confirm his version of events. After hearing this, Rathbun suddenly became able to guide authorities toward the location where he said he had buried her. On November 24th and 25th, 1995, investigators used a helicopter and ground search teams to locate the burial site in the Angeles National Forest. The recovery operation was supervised by forensic specialists, and after approximately 8 hours of careful excavation, Linda's body was removed from the shallow grave. Investigators were surprised by how well preserved her remains were after more than a week underground. Experts explained that the cool conditions, elevation, shade, and characteristics of the burial site had slowed decomposition. Her body had effectively been preserved by the cold environment. The autopsy quickly undermined Rathbun's claim that she had been run over by a vehicle. If she had been struck in the manner he described, examiners expected to find characteristic injuries to areas such as her knees and legs. Instead, those injuries were absent. Investigators and medical experts found other injuries, inconsistent with an automobile accident, including marks suggesting restraint around the ankles and internal injuries, indicating that Linda had been subjected to severe violence. The ligature marks became important because investigators compared them with materials recovered from Rathbun's possession. Another significant issue involved the condition of her clothing and body, which prosecutors argued did not support Rathbun's claim of a sudden accidental death followed by a panicked burial. Even more significant was the medical evidence showing that Linda's death was not consistent with being hit by the vehicle. Toxicology also found a high concentration of alcohol in her system. The medical examiner concluded that Linda had died from asphyxiation caused by compression to her neck and chest, and that she had been sexually assaulted before her death. Evidence indicated that she had struggled violently. For her family, learning that her final moments had been so painful was devastating. A photograph taken after Linda's body was recovered was shown to family representatives, but her parents chose not to look at their daughter in that condition. Rathbun was formally charged with murder, and bail was set at $1 million. He continued to insist that Linda's death had been accidental. While in custody, he attempted to harm himself with a razor and was placed under increased supervision. Rathbun later introduced yet another version of what had happened. This time, he claimed that Linda had voluntarily initiated sexual behavior and that the interaction between them had initially been consensual. According to his later testimony, an argument began afterward and escalated into a physical struggle. Prosecutors rejected this account as inconsistent with the forensic evidence. Rathbun testified that after the encounter became tense, he tried to calm Linda and that the situation escalated after a driving maneuver frightened or injured her. He claimed that Linda became angry and threatened to sue him. According to Rathbun, he attempted to restrain her with one hand as their struggle became increasingly aggressive. He said that he eventually sat on her in an effort to stop her from fighting, and at some point realized that she was no longer breathing. He claimed that he tried to revive her but failed. As for the marks around Linda's ankles, Rathbun offered explanations involving the use of restraints after or during the struggle. Prosecutors and medical experts argued that his account did not fit the physical evidence and that the ankle injuries were more consistent with deliberate restraint during the assault. On December 1, 1995, a funeral service was held for Linda at a church connected to her life. More than 1,000 people attended. They included friends, relatives, colleagues, and people who had never known her personally but had been deeply affected by the tragedy of her death. The media reported extensively on Linda's death and funeral, emphasizing the warmth and promise that people who knew her associated with her life and expressing sympathy for the Sobek family. After the funeral, Linda's relatives publicly called for justice and punishment for the persons responsible. Investigators believed the accumulated evidence spoke strongly against Rathbun's accident story. The violence Linda had suffered was not consistent with his original claim that she had simply been struck by a vehicle. As Rathbun realized how serious his legal position had become, he continued trying to explain the evidence. He claimed that rolls of photographic film could prove that Linda had voluntarily participated in the photo shoot and in sexual activity with him. When the film was examined, 4 rolls contained ordinary photographs of a clothed woman, while another roll contained 13 blurry, double-exposed images of a woman in provocative poses. Because the images had been exposed over previously used film, it was difficult to identify the vehicle or even conclusively identify the woman in the photographs. Investigators therefore had to determine whether the photographs actually showed Linda and whether they had been taken in the same prototype vehicle involved in the November 16th assignment. During the investigation, authorities discovered that Rathbun had photographed another prototype automobile weeks before the assignment involving the Lexus. Investigators obtained reference images of the interiors and dashboards of the vehicles. Using image enhancement and comparison technology, specialists determined that the vehicle shown in the disputed photographs was not the same prototype Lexus Rathbun had been photographing on the day Linda died. Experts also concluded that the woman in the disputed images did not match Linda's body proportions, and the clothing and other visual details did not correspond with Linda's known appearance that day. This seriously damaged Rathbun's attempt to use the photographs as evidence that Linda had voluntarily engaged in the activity he described. Investigators also continued contacting models whose photographs had been found at Rathbun's house. They wanted to make sure that the women had merely posed for unusual staged photographs and had not actually been harmed. At the time, newspapers and investigators openly considered whether Rathbun might have been linked to other disappearances or unsolved killings involving young women and models, including cases in other states. However, no sufficient evidence was produced to charge him with those crimes. Rathbun's murder trial began in the autumn of 1996. Prosecutors argued that Rathbun had taken Linda to an isolated location under the pretext of a professional photo shoot, hoping to persuade her into sexual activity, and prepared to use force if she rejected him. They argued that alcohol had been used and that Linda's friends considered heavy drinking uncharacteristic of her. According to the prosecution, when Rathbun failed to obtain what he wanted voluntarily, he assaulted Linda and ultimately killed her. 2 models who had worked with Rathbun in 1994 testified about hostile and negative remarks he had allegedly made about Linda. According to testimony presented in court, Rathbun had previously said that he did not want to work with Linda again and had spoken about her with resentment. Prosecutors argued that Linda had rejected him and that he harbored anger toward her. Rathbun and his defense team continued to insist that the disputed photographs supported his claim of consensual sexual activity. But forensic analysis badly weakened that argument. On November 1st, 1996, after approximately 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Charles Rathbun guilty of first-degree murder and of forcibly sexually assaulting Linda Sobek with a foreign object. Rathbun was later sentenced on December 16, 1996, to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for Linda Sobek's murder. He was sent to serve his sentence in the California state prison system. As the jurors left the courtroom after the verdict, Linda's mother, Elaine, her father, Bob, and her brother, Steve, tearfully embraced and thanked members of the jury. Linda's family later turned the reward effort into the Linda Sobek Memorial Fund, intended in part to help battered and abused women and to create something positive from the tragedy. Around $100,000 had been pledged to the original reward fund, and the family said those funds would be redirected toward charitable purposes. 10 years after Linda's death, her family still spoke publicly about their pain and anger. They struggled with the thought that Linda might still have been alive if the earlier 1979 rape allegation against Rathbun had resulted in a conviction and prison sentence. Whenever they were interviewed, members of the Sobek family described how difficult it had been to live through the years without Linda and how impossible it was to replace the space she had left in their lives. Her family remembered her smile, her contagious laugh, and the happiness she had brought into their world. The verdict had been delivered, and justice appeared to have been achieved. Yet questions remained about whether Rathbun might have been involved in other crimes. The supplied text then claims that in 2010, a private investigator working on the disappearance of another young woman noticed similarities with the Rathbun case. According to that portion of the text, the investigator began reviewing older disappearances and allegedly discovered a pattern involving missing young women in California and elsewhere, many of whom had some connection to the modeling industry. 6. The text says that several women who disappeared during the 1980s and 1990s had similarities to Linda, worked as models, and had attended photo shoots with lesser-known photographers. It further claims that a number of them had worked with the same agent or professional network that had at one time been connected to Rathbun. The text then refers to rumors about closed or secret clubs allegedly involving Rathbun and other influential photographers. According to this account, enough information supposedly emerged to suggest that Rathbun had been part of a larger criminal network exploiting young models. The supplied text further claims that new evidence was eventually presented and that Rathbun admitted from prison that Linda had not been his first victim. It says that he reluctantly admitted to having worked with other criminals over many years while denying responsibility for their murders. According to the text, this alleged development caused public shock and led to a major investigation, allowing families of missing women to obtain long-awaited answers. The text concludes by claiming that Linda Sobek had not been a random victim, but had been the last in a long sequence of crimes hidden behind the glamorous world of modeling, glossy magazines, and photography, and that her murder ultimately became the beginning of the end of a larger criminal network. In this telling, Linda's death became a symbol of the struggle for justice for women harmed by the darker side of the modeling industry. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves.